Uh, as we're just sharing about the Black Future Newsstand, our fellow panelists, we've been happy to be able to collaborate with you all and with your organizations on this work, this futuring work, this visionary narrative change work. And so, yeah, excited for this conversation today. And really, the purpose of this repair roundtable is to talk about narrative repair interventions and why they're necessary, especially in this, political moment and in the spheres of work that we're in. And each of our institutions is taking a different kind of like focus or lens or perspective on the work of repair in a really interesting way. And so wanted to gather us together to be in conversation. And I think it's going to be very edifying and educational for all of us and really encouraging. And so I'm going to start by reading some short bios and then ask y'all to introduce yourselves more in depth. And so participating on the roundtable today is going to be my colleague Joseph Torres, Senior Advisor of Reparative Policy and Programs here at Media 2070. Joe is also a co-creator of Media 2070 and an author and an advocate. Joe's expert research and analysis advances a reparative policy agenda, and his scholarship builds on News for All the People, the New York Times bestselling book that he co-authored with Juan Gonzalez. Next, I'm going to introduce my friend Terry Marshall, co-founder of Intelligent Mischief. And Terry is a founder and executive creative director, also an artist, a writer, cultural innovator, creative strategist. He helped train me up. Okay, so you got to know, if you think I'm dope, you got to know Terry is dope. And he has over 25 years of experience as a labor and cultural organizer. And finally, I'm going to bring up Trevor Smith of the Bliss Collective. Trevor Smith is the co-founder and executive director of the Bliss Collective, standing for Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. Also a writer, a researcher, and strategist focused on racial inequality, wealth inequality, reparations, and narrative change. Let's give it up for this power-packed panel. Super excited for our discussion. And so starting with Joe, I'm going to ask you to introduce your work and your approach as a researcher. Um, why are you engaged in the work of repairing narratives and reparative journalism, and why that work is important to you in this moment?
Yeah, thanks, Tia. I I've been thinking about this. We call it. I've been doing this for this particularly like working on issues of redressing issues of race and coming to grips with what has been the story of the role of U.S. media institutions and media policy in upholding white racial hierarchy. And to me, that's a part of a narrative storytelling. We're putting media within the center of a site of harm that needs to be redressed in order for us to even have a chance to be able uh, to fight for policies of greater redress of our basic human civil rights. And so I'll just say for me, like the other day I have this on my desk. This is start my journey started like 20 years ago, really going down this road. This little here, this little self pamphlet that Juan Gonzalez and I wrote in 2004 was we were trying to get the journalists of color. We self-published it to try to get journalists of color at the Unity Journalists of Color Convention in 2004 to fight for media policy because we need to own and control our own uh, broadcast stations, our own media outlets to be able to tell our own stories. And that the struggle, and then then with the Media 2070, the book we wrote in the Media 2070, to me, for us to be able to tell our own stories, right? It's almost the 200th anniversary of the Black Press. We wish to plead our own cause, right? For those, the famous saying, the Black Press, right? But the thing is like it's um it's a structural issue. At the end of the day, it is a structural issue because the U.S. government has played a role in the creation of each iteration of our media system, whether it's newspapers, telegraph, radio, TV, cable, the internet. And in all these decisions, they had chose to turn over control of the infrastructure uh, to white owners uh, who would be able to uphold racial hierarchy. And so and their narratives are devoted to that, and so they are, so to me, when we talk about resources and ability to not just tell our stories, but also distribute it to the masses, right? To be able to distribute using the communication infrastructure to distribute to the masses, we have to deal with the structural issues that have been we've been dealing. This is a structural issue. It's a structural issue of not just of resources, but to be able to. We're always trying to convince other people to distribute our content on their platforms, on the on the on their distribution networks. Because we don't have sufficient distribution networks in our communities to be able to reach the masses as we need to. I mean, folks have done an amazing job right through the years. There's always been, and I'll stop here. There's always been exceptions where like we do reach the masses through our own communities, right? We do able to break through, but it's such a heavy lift all the time, right? And then those institutions get attacked by the government, you know, to prevent our communities from telling our stories. And so, to me, I've devoted my career to telling that story of of race in the U.S. media, in the subjugation of how media policies and now tech policies and telecom policies uh, has been devoted to the subjugation of Black folks and other folks of color, especially colonized communities. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yes, for that context and that background, and your perspective as a researcher and helping to understand the structural roots, right, especially of our media structure, and the role it plays in upholding structural racism. And ask Terry for you to go next, introduce yourself, why your approach is cultural organizing and the work of repair is so important, and why that's the way that you're focusing your work right now.
Yeah, thank you, Tia. Thank you, everyone, giving me the opportunity to speak. And your introduction to me was amazing. So, my name's Terry Marshall. I'm here. I'll try to be succinct and quick. I could be long-winded. I'll try to do that. And I'm also recovering from flu, so forgive me if I'm gonna forget things and words. Terry Marshall, founder of Intelligent Mischief. We're a creative studio that works to unleash Black imagination to shape the future. We do that to design social dream spaces and experiences, and put people basically in the future right now. And what we currently have is a exhibition and a physical space in Bushwick, Brooklyn, 195 Morgan Avenue, that's called The Futures of Repair. And The Futures of Repair is an art exhibit that answers the question, what future worlds do reparations make possible? Right? And we have six artists who have interactive Afrofuturist exhibitions in the space. At the same time, this is a shameless plug. Come on through Thursday through Sunday, 7 to 10 p.m. This is a big experiment we're doing, a big opportunity that we have. And how this came about is really, I'll go into the story of how we started it, and I'll explain like more what the intervention itself is, which is a cultural shift intervention, cultural organizing intervention into the realm of making reparations possible and real. About 2022, we worked on a project that I think actually we had Tia work with us on and doing world building around the issue of immigration and trying to create a good immigration narrative, right? A successful one. And we particularly tackled the issue of the potential problem of Black Americans and Black immigrants fighting each other. And yes, Tia was part of the writer's room for that world that we built. So it was a 6 weeks process, brought activists and artists together. And out of that came through researchers who helped be part of that project. They actually told us they was working on another project around reparations and actually was so impressed by our project. They actually told us that there weren't many folks acknowledging folks who do this, but they didn't see a lot of work happening around futuring within the reparations work, and that was probably a place where we could be useful because the one of the biggest problems with reparations was the hope gap, right? Like people like you have a lot of agreement that we especially among Black folks that we need reparations, but people not believing that was possible. And a lot of our work deals with world building, featuring, making the worlds that seem impossible possible, taking fictional worlds and how do we make it a reality. What we did from there is that we did again, a 6 week process working with 120 different artists, creators, organizers, activists throughout the country. And we pull from ideas of building this world like 100 years in the future. We have reparations. And what is a culture? What culture of repair do we have to create to make reparations possible? What would it be? What would be the things? What would be the world that looked like that we already had reparations in? We took that world that we built. We worked with a curator, Mia Imani, to find 6 artists who then went out, accepted the challenge, and they built interactive art pieces that represent this world. And we had our grand opening in just August 20th. No, July 25th. We had a grand opening. Trevor was there, a lot of people coming out to it. And yeah, it was amazing. And we've been having the space open ever since. And it's an interactive world that you could come through and all the different pieces. The 6 artists were Alicia B. Wormsley, American artist, Ari Malenciano, New Gota, Roy Scott, Terrence Nance. And their pieces, yeah, people have to see it for themselves. The pieces are amazing. But just to talk about, I'll tell one piece in particular, kind of like my favorite piece. Don't tell the other artists. New Gota, he has a piece that looks so, we always be like, this looks like something out of Wakanda. It's a piece that's like a giant black sculpture that actually is playing on loop the house music song Follow Me. And the sculpture, you're supposed to lean on it. People are afraid to touch it, but you lean on it. And he talks about, there's a quote that says, there's no good system except for a sound system. And if you people lean on the piece, it reinforces, people can feel the bass, and it actually has a frequency that's very much deals with healing. If people know the history of the song, it was a house music song that was created for Martin Luther King's birthday. And it's a beautiful song. And so that song's on loop. It's something that interactively reinforces us holding each other together. And it's supposed to be this futuristic piece that comes from like, we've had reparations where we have. So the whole room is filled with Afrofuturist art pieces that really push you in that space. And we also do imaginals, like meditational practice, world building that people come through, and you could get tea as well as part of it. So all this is like we build the infrastructure. Like when people walk into this world, we want them to be able to dream and imagine. So that's building their imaginal capacity. We also want to feel this is what reparations feels like. And we want to get at that level, the affective level. How can we create the affect of reparations is what we need so people will have a demand for it. And I'll stop there. So I think I said everything.
Oh my gosh, it sounds so amazing. I'm scheming it on when I'm going to be able to come out to New York to see it. And thank you for joining us, during your recovery. Y'all really pulled up for us. I appreciate it. Always appreciate your time. And finally, Trevor, if you want to introduce your work as a writer and a researcher. And I know, Bliss Collective is working on braiding solidarity, and why your focus is on building solidarity right now, narratively, and how I'm not gonna tell you to talk about how hard it is, but it's hard. But why is that your focus and your approach, and why is it important in narrative repair right now?
Yeah, thanks so much, Tia. And yeah, such a pleasure to be here. So appreciate y'all having me. So yeah, my name's Trevor. I'm based in New York. I'm from Maryland by way of Freetown, Sierra Leone. And I like first got into reparations work or the reparations space through research through academia. When I moved to New York for grad school, I had reached out to this economist, Dr. Sandy Darity, who was working on what would become his latest book. And each chapter kind of looked at a different aspect of reparations. The chapter that I was working on was really looking at the role of media in reparations and the role media should be playing in reparations. And so I kind of, my research started at, and what I posit is that reparations should be around restructuring, or a main tenet of reparations should be around restructuring our racial hierarchy and eliminating anti-Blackness. And so I was like, okay, well, where did anti-Blackness start as it relates to kind of like the media industry? And a big aspect of it was minstrel shows. So tracing from minstrel shows to today. And that kind of really led me into this world of really thinking about, okay, like, what are the like social, psychological aspects of reparations? And so after working on that book, I worked at the org called Liberation Ventures, where I ran a lab called the Reparations Narrative Lab. Benikia participated in it, representing Media 2070. Aisha participated in it, representing Intelligent Mischief. And yeah, we brought together a group of advocates, researchers, storytellers for a year to really ask ourselves, like, what is the narrative that we want to communicate as it relates to reparations? And what stands in our way? Like, what are the mindsets and the ideas and the narrative roadblocks that stand in our way? And like two major themes that led me to co-founding Bliss were like the zero sum narrative. So if Black people get something, someone else is going to lose. And you'll see it with white people. Like if Black people get reparations, white people are going to get higher taxes, or they're going to lose something. Or you even see it with other communities of color, as we saw with affirmative action, where that lawsuit was, the Harvard lawsuit was led by Asian people, where it's like affirmative action is unfair to Asian people. And so this like zero sum narrative is like a big roadblock. And I think the only way in which to address the zero sum narrative is through solidarity building. And then another thing that we grappled with a lot, and I think folks have grappled with for years, decades, centuries, is what does it look like to call for reparations, particularly land, which is a big aspect of reparations, on stolen land? And what does it look like to be in conversation with tribes, indigenous leaders, and indigenous-led organizations? And so that's what like led me to co-found Bliss alongside my co-founder Savannah. We met in grad school and we were at a party. We asked ourselves this question, like, why isn't the Black-led movement for reparations and the indigenous-led movement for land back closer together? And then Savannah prompted us to think like, okay, if we're going to try to build solidarity across Black and indigenous communities, what is our class analysis? Like, what is our analysis around the economy? And so what we try to do is create the space, create the infrastructure, which we call like narrative and solidarity infrastructure for different groups, different actors, I should say, different actors who all play a role in shifting narratives. Create the space for those folks to come together to collectively shift narratives around race, around class, around the origin story of this nation, and build solidarity together. So we picked 4 specific movements that we feel uplift the narrative of like repairing the harm and spreading the wealth. So we focus on the Black reparations movement, Indigenous land back movement, guaranteed income, and baby bonds. And we are taking like an influence to influencer approach, essentially. We have 43 members who are working across those different movements. It's a mix of local orgs, national orgs, base building orgs, content creators, artists. Intelligent Mischief is one of our members. And we resource them with some money for them to collaborate and to take solidarity narratives into society. And our hope is that not only we start to see like more relationships across movements strengthen, but then also like via those relationships, folks start to like launch reparations and land back campaigns or braided stories. But first, that those relationships, particularly amongst the movement actors, have to be strong first for those coalitions to really exist. So yeah, that's where we are.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm super excited about Bliss's work as well. And I think my next question, and I'll start with you this time, Trevor, is how have these your most recent narrative interventions been received? And I'm starting with Trevor because I want to talk about the videos and how people are participating in that, and then also the Solidarity Gym. So yeah, how have your interventions being received, and what is some of the kind of like feedback that you've been getting from people who've been engaging with that work? I'll start with Trevor.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So I'll answer it a couple different ways. So we worked with one of our members. He's a content creator. His name is Garrison Hayes. This is the very first thing we did. We did a study. We wanted to see the effect of braiding a story about reparations and land back and slavery and colonialism. What would the effect of that video be against videos that only talked about reparations or only talked about land back? And so we found that that braided narrative video was the most effective at increasing support amongst both Black and Indigenous people. And we only tested it on Black and Indigenous people. But it was the most effective of increasing support for both movements across both groups. So that's what the data shows us. And then when we also just look through the comments on Garrison's video, a lot of folks, particularly Native folks, were just very thankful. Like I remember one comment was, "It's so heartening to see a Black man talk about this. Like, thank you for standing in solidarity with us," which I'm assuming the comment was coming from a Native person. Um, and so I think like generally, what the data shows us, what Garrison's TikTok comments showed us was that um, braiding the narratives of reparations and land back uh, are good, and like people like that. It's receptive. It makes sense to people. I think and then um, uh, somebody else made a video kind of attacking the essence of bliss and what we're trying to do, and that video and Garrison. And so I do think that there are some people out there that will get upset with the notion of braiding narratives, um, Black people particularly. And I think to me, it's a trauma response, and I understand it, where it's, Black folks have been calling for reparations for like 400 years more. And so, but consistently the country has said no and like kicks the can down the road. And so when you go through that, it is harder to think about how we build solidarity with another group. And it kind of forces you to, or pushes you to be insular. And so I definitely understand why some folks might feel a little bit hesitant to engage in solidarity from the Black community, specifically when they feel like we're constantly put at the end of the line. But that actually is where liberation is born, through solidarity and through that struggle. And so that's kind of our thesis, and that's what we're sticking with.
I love it. I love it. It's heartening to hear the research about how you've been able to, shift or inform people's attitudes. That's always really, I think, useful, especially in narrative change work, to hear to understand audiences' responses. And of course, like these are also challenging ideas, right? And very challenging to people. And so it's to be expected that there'll be like a range of responses. Next, Joe, I want to ask you, how's your most recent kind of writing and work being received? You're working on an essay series around the FCC and the 14th Amendment. How are people, what's the feedback that you've gotten so far, and how are people engaging with that thought leadership?
Well, it's a new essay. It just came out last month, and it's just an essay. Again, as I was talking before, as we try to understand what has been the function and role of media institutions and media policy, and when you actually continue to simplify it, really, it's in upholding racial hierarchy, is that they're really undermining equal protection rights of Black folks and other communities. Um, that's what it's effectively doing, is undermining basic civil and human rights, right? And the 14th Amendment is one of the most, maybe the most important amendment, or one of the most important amendments in the Constitution, because it actually deals with issue of equality for the first time, and it actually it's an amendment for redress, right? And so, if we think about where we're at now, it's only been, less than 60, 60 years basically, where efforts to try to reconcile what was stopped during Reconstruction, what was violently opposed with Reconstruction, and then of course the Nadir, and then with Jim Crow racism, and into the 1960s, where the promise of the 14th Amendment came back into play and the neoliberal policies came along to consolidate everything and all that. But it's the idea of like to try to understand that. And so if we are thinking about policy solutions, um, we have a palette of potential options to think about when it comes to what are the structural solutions to redress the media system and media institutions that a primary function has been to undermine equal protection rights, civil and human rights of Black folks, right? And so, and so, it's been well received. It's so far. I've gotten a few interview requests to talk about it. It's still new. It still needs to get out there. And this is not, and it's the first of many to write because there's so many stories to tell from this vantage point, and we have those stories. And I'll just finish with this that, we talked about in the first essay, the creation of the Federal Communications Commission, which is oversees broadcasting policies, uh, uh, broadband, and all these things, right? And who are these folks? The birth of commercial radio was really during the Woodrow Wilson era, and Woodrow Wilson was a devout white supremacist, right? Who just in his writings, just the way he hated Reconstruction, hated black folks gaining power, and the person who was in charge as the Secretary of Navy development of commercial radio was a guy named Josephus Daniels, who was the publisher of the Raleigh News and Observer in 1898, where he helped to lead the overthrow of the fusion government in Wilmington, North Carolina, that overthrew the government. So Joseph S. Daniel was a key actor, and now he is determining broadcast policies. Woodrow Wilson's administration investigated the black press, right? Then you get to Herbert Hoover, who folks know because of the Great Depression, but he was critically important into development of housing policies in the United States and commercial broadcasting, the birth of commercial broadcast policies in the housing policies. He was developing racial housing covenants, right? And so he's the person who's also helping to decide and shape the future of broadcast radio, right? Broadcasting. And then the first chairman of the FCC, and we have other examples, was on the Mississippi Supreme Court, from 1960 to 1924. And of course, they upheld cases to continue to reinforce the harsh racial hierarchies in Mississippi. These are the folks who are responsible for the construction of broadcasting. And then who got broadcast stations? Segregationists got broadcast stations. We use that in 1953, and I'll stop here. ABC merged with Paramount. You hear about Paramount today, but Paramount Theaters. Paramount Theaters were operating segregated movie theaters, and yet the FCC allowed, it was in the public interest now, right, to allow ABC, a network that owned broadcast stations, to merge with Paramount. There's these two companies, and the company was operating segregated. We haven't reckoned with the relationship of powerful broadcasters. It's easy to pick the segregations out in the South because they were plenty. But what about NBC and CBS? Like all the powerful companies, what was their relationship to segregation? And how did segregation impacted the programming you saw? They were worried about the Southern stations boycotting broadcast network the networks carry. So it affected what we saw on television. So what was the implicit relationship to it and explicit and all that, right? Like we have not come to grip. We have not reckoned with that, And so when you see today these companies acquiescing on DEI so easily, it's because it's in their DNA. This is what they've always been about. And the idea that after George Floyd, they're making the George Floyd uprising, make DEI commitments, and if you want to just take it at face value, it's a testimony to their failure to integrate their institutions for the past 60 years, right? So we have not reckoned, and all of this is undermining equal protection rights, right? It's helped to undermine the equal protection rights of Black folks and other, communities that have been helped by and protected by it, and civil and human rights have was somewhat restored to some degree after in the 1960s, and now it's being undermined again. And so we have not redressed this history, and in order for us, and not just, we have to redress this history in order, in this struggle, if we're going to get, especially at this moment, if we're going to have a liberated future, we have to deal with the structural racism and we haven't even talked about tech, but media and media system and tech role the critical role they play in shaping narratives, right? Because they have the power to do it, you know, to reach the masses in a way that we don't have. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's so powerful. I think that that's an excellent um, to hear. Number one, the work that you're doing with the research and this series of essays to help really name the harm, name how deep they go, because now that, kind of tactically, people are looking at, oh my gosh, the FCC, attacking, corporate broadcasters, pulling funding from public broadcasters, all of these different things. People are struggling to make sense of how and why, right, this administration is choosing to do this. But if we can learn more about the history and understand that context, that these are institutions that were founded by and advanced by segregationists to uphold racial hierarchy, to try to prevent the dissemination of ideas, right, that would oppose white supremacy. They would understand, and the kind of shorthand that I've been using for it is FCC redlinings. They've been redlining our broadcasts, redlining our airwaves, and these institutions were founded along the same time as the housing authority, right? It's the same time as these different administrative structures to try to control and retract the racial progress that was being made, or social progress that was being made, and to control and prevent social progress being made by African American folks in the fight for, shaping this democracy. And so in talking about those, the Futures of Repair space, Terry, is, a dream space, a healing space to try to not just reckon with, the harm, but also like to get people into a mode of what does it look like for us to repair these harms. And so, congratulations on the grand opening. Really excited to hear how people have been responding to it, how people have been participating with the space, and what feedback y'all have been getting from Futures of Repair.
Yeah, thank you again. Yeah, I won't be long because we just opened and we're still experimenting with times. But we are working with Center for Artistic Activism to do research on exactly what is the response. What's can we like measure can we measure what's the results of people walking through this experience in space? So that's still coming along. We've definitely got nothing but positive feedback. Everyone goes through, thinks is amazing. At least that's what they tell me to my face. But online too, I think. But no, people have really been amazed when they go through. And the one thing I keep noticing is people come through and they immediately get other ideas, and it opens up the range of what's possible. And the thing that's fascinating to me is like when we create the space, that was one of the key things that we wanted to measure. We kept saying like, can you measure like what do people think was possible after they come through? And everyone that keeps coming through, like someone just came through last night, and then the one thing they kept saying was like, I have so many ideas right now. This space has allowed me to think and breathe, and it allowed me to imagine. Then they're spitting ideas to us like rapidly. The day after the opening, I went in, I had time to go in there by myself the day, and I laid down, I just came back with a bunch of ideas, and I was like, no, there's something to what we created, and we have information relating people connecting. We also like connect folks. We want to connect folks to like folks who are doing policy work on reparations and other movement work. So we're actually looking to partner with organizations and folks to do programming, like have artists and a policy person give a talk there together, right? And like have access to information about like, hey, here's concretely what's happening. But one things I could honestly say just from like just observing folks, they keep coming in and being like, whoa, I think now this is possible. Or like, wow, I really stepped into another world. That's the other thing they keep saying. This really feels like a portal. And it's crazy because I would feel like if someone told me this, you'd think like we was bribing people. Because literally when we was in the planning, these are some of the words we kept using of like what we want people to feel like. And we feel like we're achieving that. So we're gonna work with Center for Artistic Activism on doing the research, but also like connect folks and it's still building, developing, but that's what we've been hearing and getting feedback on so far.
Amazing. So exciting. Um, so my last question, and I'm going to start with you this time, Terry, is, um, and you've already started kind of talking about it a little bit, is what are you excited about for your work? And what are the ways that you hope your work will be able to make an impact or make ripples, around repairing narratives?
Oh man, is yeah, exactly that. Like to see ideas spawn out of the work, to see ideas spawn out of the space, to see people meet each other and connect, and then see like something they create in the world together. A lot of times I've developed the practice of creating worlds and spaces. That's usually like kind of like my goal in doing that. But actually having a physical space and the theme of repair and reparations has made it so likely impossible. Like there's a bunch of ideas right now. Just talking to someone last night, or people who've been coming through, I'm like, okay, yeah, we really want to make these things happen. And people who have like, yeah, I don't want to blow up this spot, but some people have like, there's an organization that came to us with an organizing opportunity. That's a very creative, organized opportunity. And another individual came last night with a very similar idea, do not know each other. We're like, yeah, we got to connect you, but it all came at the intersection of coming to our space, you know? So I'm looking forward to like just seeing the literal ripple effects. Like we could see it happening. We see the connections being made, and seeing like what's possible. And some of the things, I'm gonna do a shameless plug here. Me and Tia are both in a fellowship called Civic Media Fellowship, and we just produced some of the fellows just produced a book called We Are Civic Media. And my chapter in the book is talking about affect and affective mobilizing folks. So our space is actually an example of stuff I'm talking about in the book. So yeah, I'm gonna put a link in the chat for people because that what I talk about in that book is what I hope would be the result I see coming out of our space and for the reparations movement.
Amazing. Definitely, we welcome all shameless plugs and share the resources out with our audiences and online and all that good stuff. We always like to big people up here. Trevor, what are you excited about? What are you hoping will be able to come about as a result of the solidarity work that Bliss is building and experimenting with? And yeah, what's exciting you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things are exciting me. I mean, I think the most exciting thing is we're bringing together our founding collective members in New Mexico in 2 months. Yeah, in 2 months. And that'll be, for me personally, it'll be the largest space that I've been in, or the space with the most Black and Indigenous people there at one time that I've ever been in. And so I'm just really proud that me and Savannah, that's what that was the question that started this. What would it look like to bring a bunch of Black and Indigenous folks together? And to like the point that Terry's making, like when you bring dope folks together, you create the space for folks to dream, like dope things happen. And I got to do that. I had the benefit of being able to do that at Liberation Ventures with the Reparations Narrative Lab, and that influenced a lot of my thinking. And so I'm really just excited to see like Black and Native folks talking about the pool and folks sharing the stories about their land and where they came from and their kin and their families. And I think it's so. I think one of the things I've reflected on is like we are the ones. Like I'll talk to like all y'all, and and I'll just think about like, and you just when you start to go to like different spaces, and you start to realize you're like, oh no, like we are this, like this is the movement. Like the movement sounds amorphous, and this is the movement, and then for me, what I'm really excited about is to see leaders connect with each other. And that was the other vision of Bliss. Like folks who were like a part of like Robin Rue Simmons getting one of the first places to like actually get reparations policy passed at the city level. I'm excited to see her sit down and talk to Nick Tilson, who runs NDN Collective and has been trying to work with folks across the country, successfully like returning land to indigenous communities. And these two leaders need to know each other. And so I'm just excited and very proud and very honored that we're creating the space for leaders to connect as well. And then just the last thing that I'm excited about is just to see we're creating the space for folks to experiment. And so just in the past couple of months, as we've talked to folks of like, how would they like to utilize the fund that members have access to called the Radical Collaboration Fund, we've heard a lot of great ideas like Someone's like, oh, we need to do a reparations and land back film festival in Tulsa. Someone was like, someone is like, we are already partnering with University of Washington to do a reparations and land back curriculum, and we're going to bring it to the students. And so I'm just really excited to see like what folks come up with as it relates to how do we deepen our work, but together, like across movements, or what are some new ideas that folks got that they want to try to bring to life. So I'm just also excited to see those things come to life.
Wonderful. And Joe, we're going to close with you. What are you excited about your work, about the essay series? How do you hope, or what do you hope can be the impact of doing this, kind of public education, thought leadership? We're working on some other types of content using the material from the essay to distribute as well as political education. So yeah, what's exciting to you about this?
Yeah, it was, I guess I'll go with my hopes, because it's like it's a tough time, right? And in our country, and it's hard watching all the Instagram videos of what's going on. So I try to like the algorithm more with these people dancing and stuff, so it gets me a better feed sometimes. Uh the hope is this, we're in a process of a constitutional collapse in this country, right? And what are the ideas? So let's say if things change and those who are in power now are not in power anymore, how do you fix a constitutional collapse, right? It's when the constitutional is flawed, right? Well, one way is like to start to, the reason why our rights were expanded was because of a different interpretation of the Constitution the Supreme Court had in 1954 and 19, during the civil rights struggle, right? And so if the Democrats kind of like, I'm going to say the Democrats because I can assume it's going to be the Democrats, right? Not, they say win back. Like if you expand the courts, right? What are the ideas that we have ready to go to start implementing to redress, not just this is a continual process of redress, right? The redress for the history of enslavement, of stolen land, genocide, uh, just name all the different branches on that tree of folks who have been harmed by white racial hierarchy in all the different communities, right? And so the idea of like, what are the ideas that we need to fight for now that are big ideas, that are structural ideas that's going to get to change? And if we can't, well, I'm not trying to say like this is a moment where we need those because if um, we don't know where we're ascending to, right? But if we are going to get out of it, because it is just racial profiling straight up. There is no more like political, like legal cover. No, under the cover of the law, I'm able to it's like, no, it's this racial profiling and everyone knows it. It is blunt. It is, they always hide behind the law. Like my friend says, like, the greatest injustice happened during the cover of the law, not in violation of it. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the Supreme Court technically, and the courts give what's happening now to technically legal, but it's reprehensible, as my friend would say, right? So I just say like the working on the 14th Amendment and having a new understanding of the role that what is the role and function of media has played in media policy in racial subjugation and racial domination, right? That needs to be redressed into a media, and I say tech as well, system that we need. And so my hope is that this becomes more of a common sense and it leads to big ideas when it comes to structural policies. And so if there's a moment for structural redress, which there can potentially be to prevent what happening, let's say from happening again, that we will be in a position to implement these ideas and to implement these ideas and to take effect and start making that redress and that change. So that's how I think about it right now, of the hope for the work. And so so the hope that it become common sense and then it be acted upon when it comes to actual structural policies. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. Big hopes, big dreams, really powerful work. Thank you all for my co-panelists for sharing really powerfully about your work and taking the time. We also will be sharing this video on our YouTube channel eventually. You'll be able to share that out with your networks. But yeah, just thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. I'm really inspired and excited about it and to continue to collaborate and engage with it. I hope that this conversation has been also inspiring and sparked some ideas about how we can continue to collaborate as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Vanikia to close us out.
Thank you all.